Hey guys, tonight we're not heading into a grand ballroom with chandeliers or watching knights joust in the name of love. No, tonight we're slipping through the smoke and grit of a war camp where a treaty isn't sealed with ink, but with you. You're the treaty. You're the fine print. Your dress is barely clean, your future even less so. And you're about to marry a man whose troops burned your cousin's village last week. The tent you're in flaps like a broken sail, straining against the wind. The ground is soft with mud and maybe blood. You're too tired to ask. Outside, the clang of armor blends with the murmurs of negotiations. Inside, you sit quietly, spine straight as a pike, because one wrong move could mean the wedding is off, or worse, very much on. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your local time and location in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The candlelight flickers, casting long shadows across your veil. It's not white, it's ash gray, hastily stitched from someone's tablecloth and pinned with a brooch you've never seen before. You're not wearing perfume. You smell faintly of salt, fear, and that weird soup the soldiers insisted was stew. Two men are speaking outside the tent in sharp bursts of Latin. One of them is your uncle. The other is a bishop, red-faced and already annoyed. You catch only fragments. Tractatus, Concilium, Virginitas, and then the bishop storms in. He eyes you the way one might examine a cracked relic, too valuable to discard, too damaged to fully trust. "She'll do," he mutters. Not exactly the poetry of courtship. Your uncle gives a satisfied nod. He looks like a man who's just traded a valuable chest for a dangerous loan. They'll bring him in, he tells you, as if talking about a shipment of grain, and just like that, your soon-to-be husband appears, or rather, ducks into the tent, brushing mud from his cloak. He's taller than you imagined, younger too. Not cruel-looking, but not kind either. Just tired. You guess war ages everyone, even the victors. He doesn't speak to you. Not yet. He just bows stiffly. No eye contact. The bishop wastes no time. A few Latin phrases, a muttered blessing, the pressing of cold hands over yours, and just like that, you're married. There's no music, no wine, no guests throwing flowers or coins. Just a contract, a reluctant groom, and a girl trying not to cry in front of the enemy. Historians still argue whether such battlefield marriages were genuinely binding under church law, or whether they were political fictions wrapped in thin sacrament. What's clear, though, is that they happened a lot, especially during long wars where peace could only be bought with something warmer than gold. You step outside the tent and the air smells of scorched earth and wet grass. Soldiers barely glance at you. You're not important to them, not as a person. You're a symbol, a stitched-up bandage on the open wound between two kingdoms. A captain leads you to a waiting horse. It's side saddle, of course. Your new husband rides ahead, speaking in clipped tones to his men. He hasn't looked back at you once. You wonder if this counts as a honeymoon. Probably not, unless being escorted under armed guard counts as romantic. A soldier hands you a cloak. It's too big. Smells like leather and horse sweat. You wrap it tighter anyway. The wind's getting colder, and your dress was never meant for travel. The countryside rolls by in browns and grays. Burnt fields. Abandoned huts. Sheep wandering without herders. You wonder how many lives changed the moment your marriage was agreed. How many families returned to broken doors thinking peace had come. Too late. Eventually, the group stops at a stone outpost, your temporary home. You dismount awkwardly, dignity discarded somewhere near mile 4. Servants appear to take your things, except you have no things, just the dress, the cloak, and a mind full of questions. Your husband finally speaks. You'll be given rooms in the West Wing. His voice is calm, flat, like he's reading from a script. You may request a lady's maid. You are not to leave the grounds. You nod, unsure what else to do. Throw a tantrum? Scream? It wouldn't help. The treaty has been signed. Your womb now holds the hope of generations. No pressure. One of the servants, a small, sharp-eyed girl named Lisa, leads you inside. She seems unimpressed by your new status. Don't worry, she whispers. No one likes him much here. Either. You stifle a laugh. It's the first moment of lightness you've had all day. Lise shows you to your room. Bare stone walls, a bed with actual sheets, luxury, and a single window with iron bars. Romantic. She helps you out of your gown, brushing away bits of leaf and ash. Tomorrow, they'll dress you properly, she says. For now, rest. The worst is over. You're not so sure, because this doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the beginning of something slower, stranger, and far more dangerous than war. Marriage. You wake to the sound of clanking armor and the thud of boots. So much for breakfast in bed. Outside your narrow window, men drill with spears in the courtyard, barking at each other in a language that sounds like yours, but always feels slightly off. You're not sure if it's the accent or the intent. Your bed is still warm, the sheets crumpled from a restless night of pacing and questions. Did last night really happen? Did you actually marry the man who, 2 months ago, ordered an attack on your people's border town? The answer arrives when a knock sounds at the door, and a servant hands you a formal scroll with wax still warm. Lady Consort of the House of Greven. That's you now. Congratulations. Your name has been changed. Your signature, which once sealed letters to your childhood tutor, now seals alliances. You've gone from a daughter of your land to a wedge between 2 empires. Your body now a demilitarized zone in silk. Downstairs, your husband, Sir Edric, Duke of Greven, or that guy who burned half our grain stores, is eating quietly in the stone dining hall. He doesn't rise when you enter, but he does gesture toward the chair across from him. Stewed pears, he says. Not poisoned. Yet. A joke? Maybe. You take a seat and find yourself oddly grateful. You've eaten enough dry oatcake and suspicion in the last few weeks that hot fruit almost feels like love. As you chew, you study him. He has the look of someone who's been soldiering since he could walk. Scar on his chin, calluses on his hands, a stare that flickers but never lands on you. He doesn't look cruel, just resigned. Like he, too, was offered little choice in this union. So, he says, still not looking up, how many cousins of yours did I kill? You freeze. He finally meets your gaze. If we're going to do this, let's not pretend we're the first lovers sewn together with blood-stained thread. You say nothing. There's no answer that won't sour your stomach. He sighs and pushes a goblet toward you. I know it's not fair. I know I'm the enemy. But believe me, my own people think I've gone mad for agreeing to marry you. Did you? You ask. He doesn't answer. Instead, he wipes his mouth and stands. You'll be escorted to the archive wing after breakfast. Learn our history. If you're going to be one of us, you'll need to memorize the family trees. Of course. Marrying the enemy comes with homework. Your escort today is a man called Brannon. Silent, stone-faced, probably carries a dagger under each boot. He doesn't speak as you walk the halls, only nods once when you pause too long at a tapestry showing the infamous Battle of Velawind, your people losing in spectacular embroidered detail. You reach the archive wing, where the air smells of wax, dust, and secrets. An old scholar greets you, squinting. "You're the wife," he mutters. "Come in. Come in. Don't sit on the red stool. It's haunted." That's your fringe tidbit of the day. Apparently, the Greven archive contains a haunted stool. No one knows who haunts it, or why, but no one has dared move it in 50 years. Something about a librarian's curse and a disgruntled poet. You sit, safely away from the stool, and begin learning. The Greven family tree is less of a tree and more of a spiny shrub. Intermarriage, betrayals, illegitimate children, duels over disputed nieces. It's a wonder the line survived long enough for Edric to inherit anything at all. "See here," the scholar says, pointing to a branching diagram. "This is where your great-uncle's cousin defected to Greven, married a baroness, wore red instead of blue, never looked back. And they let him live? They knighted him, with reservations." You study the names, feeling yourself disappear into their loops and twists. Your name has now been added too, in delicate ink beside Edric's, just like that. You exist in enemy ink. If you die now, you'll be buried under their banner. Historians still argue whether women like you, noble consorts traded like horses, had any real power in these marriages. Some say you were passive glue, others believe your influence in soft diplomacy saved thousands. You think the truth, like most truths, is somewhere in the margin notes. After hours of lineage-laden drudgery, Brannon leads you back to your chambers. The halls are quieter now. Rain falls lightly outside. You pass servants scrubbing the stone with bristle brushes, nodding silently as you go. You realize they don't quite know how to treat you yet. Are you a prisoner? A duchess? A guest with inconvenient alliances? Lise is waiting for you with a new gown, deep green, Greven's color. "Better get used to it," she shrugs. "They expect you to wear their shade now, like ivy growing on enemy walls." The gown fits, surprisingly well. You stare at yourself in the looking glass, someone in foreign colors, with the posture of a statue and eyes that don't quite belong to either side. That night, you're invited, no, summoned, to a small gathering in the War Council chamber. You assume it's strategy talk. You're wrong. It's a celebration. For your marriage, there are 12 men, 3 women, and exactly 1 lute player who looks like he's being paid in biscuits. Edric gives a curt speech about duty and honor. No one cheers, but one person does sneeze halfway through, which honestly helps. There's food, roasted fowl, spiced lentils, flatbread with a dip that looks like crushed caterpillars, but tastes surprisingly good. You nod politely. Smile, where expected. Speak only when spoken to. You are the piece now, served lukewarm with a side of suspicion. As the lute player plucks a mournful tune, you catch Edric glancing at you across the table. Just once. Not with longing or hatred, just assessment. Like he's still deciding who you really are, and you're still deciding too. The next morning begins not with breakfast in bed or poetry from a distant window, but with your new husband's cousin demanding to know whether you'll be changing your coat of arms. "You can't go about flying both banners," he says, pacing across your receiving room like a man who's never been told no. It sends mixed signals. The soldiers don't like it. The people won't know what to think. You sip your watered wine slowly and give him the most diplomatic shrug in your limited repertoire. Perhaps mixed signals are exactly what we want. He blinks. It's clearly not the answer he expected. You've said the quiet part out loud. This marriage isn't about love, lineage, or even legacy. It's about confusion. Strategic, brilliant, maddening confusion. Because truthfully, you don't belong here. Not yet. Not really. Your accent is still sharp at the edges. Your hair is braided in the old style. The ladies in waiting notice. The steward notices. Edric definitely notices. But you wear your new titles like borrowed armor and walk like you were born in it. You're invited to a memorial service that afternoon, commemorating the Battle of Fern Hollow, a Greven victory, a personal loss. You don't even need to ask who they defeated. You already know. You walk in slowly, head held high, as the clergy chants in a tongue older than either kingdom. The stone chapel is thick with incense and silence. You can feel the stares, some sympathetic, others suspicious. Your husband stands by the altar, hands folded, looking as stoic as ever. When the names of the fallen are read aloud, you hear your cousin's name. Not once, not even in passing. Just silence. Erased. You grip the bench. Just for a second. Historians still argue whether such omissions were intentional propaganda or simply the result of chaotic record-keeping. You suspect both. But in a war that lasted a decade, names were weapons, memory was territory, and forgetting was conquest. After the ceremony, a noblewoman approaches you, Lady Saracea, silver hair, ice blue eyes, teeth like a falcon's. You're braver than I expected, she says. Sitting through all that, braver than I expected too, you reply. It comes out sharper than planned. She smiles, thinly. You'll do. Later that evening, Edric finds you in the hallway, gazing at a faded fresco. The Tree of Peace, he says, planted after the last war, died in 6 months. You snort. An omen? Maybe. Maybe just bad soil. He stands beside you, quiet for a moment. My cousin meant no insult. About your arms. He's tactless. He's a politician. So are you now, Edric replies. Whether you like it or not. He's not wrong. The dress. The colors. The title. None of it was your choice. But you wear them all. You realize now that surviving here will mean more than polite dinners and well-placed smiles. You'll need allies, secrets, a strategy, and perhaps a redefinition of loyalty. That night, you sit by your window and write your first letter home. You write carefully, knowing it will be read at least twice before it leaves the castle. You say you're adjusting. You ask about your mother's health. You don't mention the omission at the memorial. You seal the letter and hand it to Lisa. She doesn't ask questions, but she does linger. They say Lady Saracea once poisoned her own steward, she whispers, for failing to bow low enough. Is that true? No idea. But she does have a lot of teacups. Teacups. Of course. Every royal court has its quiet, coded threats. Teacups. Paper fans. Overly large rings. You make a mental note to start drinking from your own flask. Or maybe just use Lisa as a decoy. You dream of the chapel that night, but it's filled with voices, chanting names you thought were lost. You wake before dawn, hand clenched around a phantom quill. The next day, you're summoned to the Hall of Arms. Apparently, there's a discussion about whether your crest, your real one, not this stitched-on identity, should be displayed during official processions. A knight named Halwyn argues in your favor. She's a bridge, he says, not a ghost. Saracia disagrees. Bridges collapse when they lean too far toward either side. You watch them bicker while a page fans you with a griffin feather fan. You never thought politics would feel this much like being bait in a bear trap. Finally, Edric steps in. She'll carry no banner, he says, voice quiet. Not until she chooses one. Everyone goes still. You go still too. The room dismisses shortly after. Edric lingers. You said I have to choose. You say when you're alone, not now, but someday. He looks tired. And not choosing is also a choice. You think of that fresco again, the tree of peace, dead in 6 months. But maybe, just maybe, your roots haven't even touched the soil yet. Back in your chamber, Lise brings a tray of candied ginger and boiled pears. They say you're making waves, she says. You raise an eyebrow. They're scared of you, she explains. Means you're doing something right. You chew on a ginger piece and try not to grimace. It's strong, bitter, cleansing, like truth. Outside, the sun is setting over a land that is still your enemy. But in this tower, with your hair down and your guard up, you're starting to realize you might be more dangerous than they ever expected. Not because of what you say, but because of what you don't. They call it a wedding, but it doesn't feel like one. The second ceremony, because of course the first hurried affair in a war tent wasn't official enough, is held 2 weeks later, this time in a chapel dripping with guilt and incense and expectations. Everyone important is here. Everyone dangerous is here. 2. You stand in front of the altar beneath a 1,000-year-old tapestry of a martyr being joyfully devoured by wolves. Symbolic, you suppose. Your new gown is the color of ash-tinted roses, stitched with so many tiny pearls it crunches when you move. Lise muttered something about it being a peace offering you can't breathe in. Behind you, the choir sings in a tongue you only half understand. Beside you, Edric stands in ceremonial armor, though thankfully without the helmet. It would have made kissing awkward. Not that there's kissing. The bishop, a different one this time, taller, drippier, even more convinced he's channeling God, says all the right things. You repeat the words in order. You take the ring. You pretend your hands aren't shaking. When he says, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," the silence is so loud you imagine it fracturing the stained glass. You and Edric barely touch hands. Your eyes meet only once, and even then, it's brief, somewhere between apology and treaty renewal. And then it's done. You are, once again, married to the enemy. The banquet afterward is a theater of forced festivity, platters of roasted meats, too many kinds of cheese, wines spiced with things that smell like exotic trees. You sit beside Edric at the head table, your backs to an enormous tapestry of your new family tree, recently updated to include your name, your Rhoda Ron. I've never seen a stag wear a crown before, you whisper to Edric, nodding at the bizarre heraldry behind you. It's a family joke, he murmurs, or possibly a threat. At least 3 nobles give you toasts so aggressively polite you wonder if they practice stabbing practice on fruit beforehand. One mentions how clever you are for surviving such a complicated war. Another calls you a truly strategic acquisition. You raise your goblet and smile through your teeth, and then there's the translator. Yes, they brought one. Just in case the people from your side, and yes, they were invited, decided to offer blessings in your native tongue. The translator's a tiny man with enormous eyebrows and a voice like a cracked bell. You like him instantly. He's the only one who doesn't seem terrified of saying the wrong thing. At one point, he leans in and says, "This woman just wished you strong hips and quiet in-laws." You nod sagely. "Tell her I hope the same for her son." You both try not to laugh. Historians still argue whether these types of public weddings were meant to validate uneasy alliances or humiliate the conquered bride. In truth, it does both. You're given gifts, some lovely, some strategic, some that feel a little too much like trophies. One elderly lord hands you a carved ivory comb and says, "This once belonged to my late wife. I hope you use it more wisely." You manage to thank him without flipping the table. Personal growth. Later, during the endless dancing, you're led onto the floor. You've trained for this since you were 8, gliding across stone and parquet, keeping your expression serene even as your ankles scream. Edric is surprisingly decent. He's light on his feet, and unlike most men you've danced with, he doesn't try to lead like it's a cavalry charge. "You don't hate me yet," he says. Half a question. "I don't know you yet." That's fair. There's a pause. You pivot, turn, and swirl past a pair of courtiers already gossiping about your earrings. "I'm trying," he says. "Whatever that's worth?" You don't answer. Not yet. The party stretches long into the night. At some point, someone tries to start a song that mocks your homeland. Edric silences it with a single look. The hall quiets. For a moment, it almost feels like loyalty. Eventually, the music slows, the fire dims, and you're led away, not to a romantic tower or a feathered bed, but to the diplomatic chamber for formal documentation. Because what's a medieval marriage without paperwork? You sign in 3 places. So does Edric. So does the bishop. One of the pages looks about 12 and holds the candle so close you're sure he's about to set someone's wig on fire. And then you're alone. Sort of. You and Edric are escorted to your shared chambers. The room is enormous. Canopied bed, private fireplace, and a full bath already steaming gently in the corner. Luxuries. Traps. He stands near the window, not quite looking at you. "You'll have your own rooms after tonight," he says. "Unless you may prefer this arrangement." Do you? He doesn't answer right away. "I think we're both exhausted." You nod. You are. There's a long pause. And then, surprisingly, he bows slightly. "Good night, Lady Consort." "Good night, Lord Treaty." That earns you a laugh. A small one, but real. He leaves. You sit on the edge of the bed, toes brushing the rug, crown already too heavy. You're now officially part of the Greven court, your name spoken in foreign halls, your face carved into their tapestries, your fate sealed with a legal document and a lukewarm roast duck. Lise enters quietly with a vial of rosewater and a towel. "Not bad for your first royal wedding," she whispers, unpinning your hair. "At least no one cried into the pudding." "Yet?" She grins. "Tomorrow's a whole new battle." You stare into the fire, wondering how many more ceremonies, gestures, and niceties it will take before someone, anyone, truly forgets which side you used to be on. And whether you'll ever forget yourself. Your wedding gift isn't a necklace, or a horse, or even a new gown, though you do receive all of those. No, the true gift arrives 3 days later, delivered by courier and sealed with red wax. A territorial charter. You sit with the document open on your lap, blinking at the list of holdings that now belong to you: castles, villages, timberland, a river toll, 3 entire market towns. Quite the dowry, Edric says, sipping wine near the hearth, boots still dusty from a morning ride. You came with more land than my uncle, and he still walks around like he invented stone. I didn't know I was coming with anything, you reply, eyes scanning the unfamiliar place names. No one told me. Of course not. It would have made you feel like a person. That one lands harder than you expect. In your own country, dowries are common, but not this imperial. This isn't just jewelry or linens. This is strategic. This is leverage in stone and wheat and tax. Historians agree that in border conflicts, noble brides were often packaged with land that acted as buffers, bribes, or barriers. But the debate continues. Were women aware of the true cost of what they brought to the altar? You now suspect the answer is, not until the ink dries? There's a map rolled up beside the charter. Edric unrolls it across the table. You both lean over it, your hair brushing his shoulder. The air between you charged not with romance, but raw responsibility. See here, Kay, he says, pointing to a jagged line of hills. This stretch used to be contested. Now it's yours. Technically ours, but you'll govern it. The peasants speak your tongue anyway. You blink. You want me to govern? Of course. Who else knows their customs, their rhythms, their harvests? You lean back, studying him. So, I'm not just a piece ribbon to tie around a sword? No, he says. You're the sheath. It's oddly flattering, in a grim, possibly dangerous way. He steps away, muttering something about sending riders to inform the stewards. You sit there, tracing the lines on the map, feeling the strange pull of responsibility. These aren't just lines on parchment, they're villages with granaries and plague memories, and people who will now call you my lady through gritted teeth. By the next day, your chamber is filled with reports, grain tallies, flood logs, tax discrepancies. One particularly long scroll seems to be a complaint about goats wandering into someone's prayer garden. You read them all, and then you begin writing back. Lise peers over your shoulder. You're actually doing the job? Someone has to. You realize you've just made yourself indispensable? That's the idea. You keep working, by candlelight, past dinner. You even skip embroidery circle, which no one seems to miss, least of all you. The other noble women may look down their noses at you, but when the harvest fails or the bandits strike, guess who they'll be begging to send guards? You send your first official edict to your new territories by fast courier, a tax easing for winter firewood, and a promise to rebuild the South Road before the snows. You sign it not with your husband's crest, but with your own sigil, a rose wrapped in thorns. You wonder if anyone will notice. They do. Within a week, you receive gifts, a bolt of dyed wool from a grateful weaver, 3 carved figurines of sheep, and, somewhat alarmingly, a severed wolf's paw in a box. It had been taking chickens, the attached note explains. You make a mental note to never open gifts before breakfast again. Edric reads the wolf letter and just says, "At least they listen to you. Are they supposed to send me pieces of animals?" He shrugs. Better than poison. A quirky tidbit of the day: in the northern provinces of Greven, it's considered good luck to send parts of hunted predators to new lords. Proof the land is being tamed. You hope they don't escalate to bare spleens. At court, your influence begins to ripple. You're approached more often, asked for opinions, usually veiled as pleasantries. Do you think the road to Elmwick will hold? Means? Will you fund repairs? What beautiful fabric! Means is your homeland preparing to export again? You smile, nod, say little, learn everything. One afternoon, during a council meeting, a young noble suggests placing a military post on one of your new holdings. Edric glances at you, waits. No, you say, calmly. It's a grain route. Soldiers would only trample morale. He doesn't contradict you. The others nod. The conversation moves on. It's a quiet victory, but a real one. That evening, you walk the battlements alone. The sky is pale with mist. The banners hang heavy. You're no longer just a guest here. You're a node of power, stitched into the tapestry by law and now, slowly, by will. You think of the girl in the war tent, the one who flinched when men argued over her like cattle. That girl hasn't disappeared. She's just evolved. And your husband? Well, Edric appears later with a tray, 2 steaming cups, and what might be the world's driest shortbread. Still awake? He asks. Always? He joins you at the stone wall, passes you a cup. I heard about the road edict, he says. Smart. They'll remember that. I want them to. I don't want to just wear the title. I want to own it. You already do. He doesn't say more, but he doesn't have to. The silence stretches, not cold this time, but companionable. The kind that says, we're in this together, like it or not. You sip your tea, watch the moon rise over your new lands, and quietly, you begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, this marriage could become something more than survival. The journey into enemy lands wasn't supposed to feel like a funeral, but here you are, draped in furs, riding side saddle, with a silent escort that looks like they're escorting a corpse instead of a duchess. It takes 3 days to reach the border. You pass hills blackened by fire, rivers swollen from snowmelt, and too many shuttered villages to count. Some residents peer out as you pass, curious, wary, hopeful. Others turn away, pretending not to see. You can't blame them. You wouldn't want to watch the person who technically just conquered you glide by in a velvet cloak either. A hawk circles overhead. One of the guards mutters, Omen. Lisa, riding behind in the second wagon, leans out to whisper, Bad or good? He shrugs. Depends on who you are. Welcome to Greven. Your first official act in your new domain is crossing the bridge at Haldmere, a low, squat structure built from dark stone. The water rushes fast beneath it. 2 flags fly overhead, yours, reluctantly raised beside Edric's, fluttering in the wind like they're trying to escape. A crowd is gathered on the other side, peasants, farmers, tradesmen, a few minor nobles. They look tired, bundled in furs, half curious, half ready to bolt. The steward of the southern marches approaches and bows deeply. My lady, he says, we've prepared your hall. Thank you, you reply, trying to sound authoritative and not like someone who's still sore from riding for 3 straight days. Historians still argue whether noble women truly controlled their dowry lands or were merely ceremonial figureheads, judging by the stack of petitions already waiting in the saddlebag. This is no ceremonial title. You're expected to rule, and fast. The hall is an old fortress, half ruined, half functional. A fire blazes in the central hearth, filling the main chamber with the scent of smoke and damp wool. You're led to a carved oak chair that clearly hasn't been used in decades. You sit. The murmurs quiet. A farmer steps forward. Your Grace, he says, holding out a cracked parchment. The river's changing course, flooded half our barley. You take the scroll, scan it, pass it to the steward. Tell me how much land was lost, then divert extra grain from the hill granaries. and send engineers to the banks before the thaw finishes. There's a pause, then a surprised, almost reverent bow. You're in. You spend the next 2 days reviewing estate ledgers, listening to disputes about oxen, grain, inheritance, and a rather passionate feud over a mill that may or may not have been sabotaged with frog spawn. Your handwriting cramps, your spine aches, your brain begins to absorb every name and tithe and timber shipment schedule. You sleep hard that night, no dreams, just the weight of the land pulling you deeper into your pillow like roots curling into soil. The next morning, you make a decision that sends the whole manor into polite panic. You go walking, alone, or as alone as a noblewoman with 2 guards and a shadowy maid can be. You step into the town beyond the walls, a sprawl of wooden houses, muddy lane, barking dogs, and snow-mottled rooftops. People stop and stare. You nod politely. They bow, awkwardly, not quite sure how deep to go. You buy a sweet bun from a stunned baker, visit the blacksmith, peek into the weaver's stall. You stop at the chapel and light a candle for your brother, then another for the people who died on both sides. One child offers you a dead crow as a gift. You accept it with great dignity and give it to Lisa the moment the boy's out of sight. She whispers, "In these parts, crows mean protection." Your quirky tidbit of the day, in Southern Greven folklore, gifting a noble, a crow ensures that no ghosts will follow them back home. You wonder how many ghosts you've got trailing you. 5? 12? A whole battalion? When you return to the fortress, Edric is there. He's leaned against the entry arch, arms folded, watching you with the kind of expression that might either be amusement or mild terror. "You went out," he says. "I rule here." You reply, "I thought I should see it." His brow twitches. "They're saying you bought bread from the baker. It was good bread, and accepted a crow. For protection." He stares at you, then laughs. Actually laughs. "You might survive here yet." You sound surprised. He doesn't answer, but he does hold out a parchment. A border dispute. 2 vassals, one from your side, one from mine. They're both claiming a river bank. Want to settle it? You take the scroll. Absolutely. Do they know I've accepted a dead crow? Because I feel very qualified now. You read the dispute aloud. It's convoluted, full of ancient charters, poorly drawn maps, and a long-standing feud that possibly started over who insulted whose pig 30 years ago. You suggest a compromise, shared grazing rights and a neutral tax overseer. It won't make either party happy, but it'll stop bloodshed. For now. Edric reads your decision, nods slowly. "We'll send it in the morning. The night is cold, but your room is warm." Lisa hums as she brushes out your hair, and for the first time in days, you feel something close to contentment. Not peace, not yet, but the quiet after the storm. Outside, the flags still whip in the wind. Your name is now known here, feared by some, respected by others, no longer foreign, just present. You stare into the hearth and realize something. You didn't just cross into enemy land. You made it yours. You're halfway through breakfast, a truly excellent apricot tart, if you're being honest, when a messenger bursts into the hall and blurts out a sentence that sounds like a joke. They're launching a siege demonstration as a wedding gift. You set down your tart. Slowly. Edric, seated across the table, sighs and wipes his mouth with a cloth. Of course they are. You blink. Is this normal? No. Turns out, in Greven military tradition, showcasing new siege technology during peacetime is considered a gesture of power and goodwill, like sending roses if roses were catapults that could flatten a watchtower in under 7 minutes. It's just a show, Edric assures you as you ride to the demonstration field. No actual destruction. And if it goes wrong, well, he says, then your dowry might lose a wall or two. You arrive on a hill overlooking the lower training grounds. Below, rows of armored men form precise ranks. Siege engines, ballistas, trebuchets, something that looks like an angry metal snail, gleam in the winter sun. A herald trumpets, banners snap in the wind. A general steps forward to deliver the speech. It's all very dramatic, right up until one of the contraptions misfires and launches a flaming barrel directly into a latrine trench. The soldiers cheer. You're not sure if it's for the accuracy or the irony. The demonstration continues with slightly more control. You watch as massive rocks soar through the air, ropes strain and snap, and proud engineers explain the improvements made since the last war. Apparently, they've shaved 3 minutes off reload time. Historians still argue whether such peace displays were meant to reassure allies or quietly threaten rivals. Either way, you're now intimately aware of the trajectory physics behind castle toppling. Lise leans over and mutters, "Do you want me to start crying to make it end early?" "Not yet," you reply. Let's see if they hit the goat pen. They don't, but they do knock over a cart of ale barrels, which the soldiers take as divine permission to start drinking. The demonstration turns into a festival. Someone brings out lutes. Someone else roasts a pig. Edric stands beside you, arms folded. This was supposed to impress you. I am very impressed. With the engineering? No. With how confidently they set everything on fire. He chuckles. There's another reason I brought you. You glance at him. Aside from target practice, I want you to meet someone. He leads you through the now cheerful chaos to a quiet corner of the field, where a group of women in faded armor sit around a kettle. They stand as you approach, scarred, sun-browned, eyes sharp. These are not ladies of the court. These are the Gray Veil, Edric says. Scout division, mostly women. They know the borders better than anyone. One of them steps forward. We heard you were governing the marshlands now. Oh, you nod. That's true. We've seen movement near the old watch posts. Could be smugglers. Could be deserters. Could be worse. You ask questions. Detailed ones. You learn they've been operating in semi-secrecy for years. Underfunded but fiercely loyal. You promise to review their supplies? They nod once, approval disguised as indifference. Later, Edric murmurs, most of the court thinks you're a ceremonial figure. You just earned a scout division. You file that away under unexpected wins. That night, back at the keep, there's a small dinner in the great hall. Less pageantry than the wedding feast. Just a handful of war captains, a few noble families, and too many puddings. You sit beside Edric again. People seem to be getting used to it. One captain leans in mid-meal. They say you handled the goat dispute without bloodshed. You nod. Just firm tone and a well-timed pie. Impressive. After dinner, there's no dancing. Just conversation. Soft lute music. A slightly inebriated noble arguing about bridge tolls. You catch snippets of gossip. Your name comes up more than once. She walks like she owns the place. She fixed the market tax issue. She smiled at Lady Saracea and lived. Progress. As the evening winds down, Edric finds you standing near the hearth. He's holding 2 goblets. Offers you one. To the siege that wasn't, he says. You clink glasses. To latrines that were, you both laugh. He leans a little closer. I know this isn't what you wanted. Any of it. You look at him, the fire casting shadows across his face. Do you think anyone ever gets what they want in these marriages? He pauses. Maybe not, but maybe we can still make something of it. It's not a promise. Not quite, but it's the most honest thing he's said. You nod. Then let's keep building. Outside, the snow begins to fall. Soft. Silent. Covering even the cracked stone with something that almost looks like peace. Inside, the fire burns low, and for the first time since your war tent wedding, you don't feel like prey. You feel like possibility. You don't realize you're being watched until the embroidery needle pricks your thumb. The ladies in waiting all gasp. One even drops her hoop in horror. You blink down at the red dot on your finger like it's a political crisis, which, in a room like this, it might as well be. She's bleeding, whispers one girl with elaborate braids and no chill whatsoever. I'll get the lavender oil, another exclaims, clearly thrilled to be relevant. You press a scrap of linen to your thumb and wave them off. It's just a drop. I've survived worse. A bold voice pipes up from the corner. Like marrying Lord Edric? There's a moment of stunned silence, followed by cautious laughter. You glance over. The speaker's a petite woman with a sharp smile and sharper eyes. You don't know her name yet, but you'll remember the tone, just on the edge of polite. A test. Later, Lise whispers, That's Lady Annalise. She's Sarasea's niece. Watches everything. Says little. Probably reports twice. You suspected as much. Your new retinue of ladies is beautiful, graceful, and terrifying in the way only court women can be. Lace sleeves and loaded questions, compliments with knives tucked inside. Today's assignment was embroidery. You're meant to sit, sew birds, and pretend you don't hear gossip floating like perfume around the room. Except you do hear it. Every bit. Apparently, 2 of your maids once courted the same knight, who now guards the cellar door. One noblewoman is deeply obsessed with falcons and keeps one in her solar. Another has a secret tattoo. Several are convinced that your union is doomed because Edric refuses to wear crimson on feast days. You pretend to embroider a peacock. You're fairly certain it looks more like a startled pine cone, but it doesn't matter. The real embroidery is in the words being woven around you. Historians still argue how much influence ladies-in-waiting had in medieval courts, whether they were background scenery or subtle power brokers. If today is any indication, the answer is both, and never when you expect it. Mid-morning, there's a knock at the solar door. A courier hands you a sealed letter. No crest. But you know the hand. It's from your sister. You haven't heard from her since before the wedding. She, too, was married off during the war. But to the other side's general, the irony doesn't escape you. 2 sisters, each traded like strategic cattle, now positioned like mismatched rooks on either end of a giant, blood-stained chessboard. You unfold the parchment slowly. Dearest, it begins. You'll be glad to know I haven't poisoned anyone. Yet, you almost laugh. The letter is short, cautious, and strangely warm. She asks about your health, about the territory, and then, at the bottom, mentions the falcon you once shared as children. His name was Thorn. He lost an eye, but still hunted like a demon. You stare at that sentence for a long time, then fold the letter and tuck it into your bodice. Your embroidery session ends when Lady Sarasea herself sweeps into the room. She nods at you as if you're a chess piece that might be useful, if moved carefully. Your Grace, she says smoothly, would you care for tea? You're trapped, but you smile. Of course. Tea with Saracea is not for the faint-hearted. It's served in porcelain thin, enough to shatter with a hard glance. The sugar is sculpted into miniature roses. The cakes are either poisoned or just aggressively dry. She gestures for you to sit. You do. I've been watching your progress, she says, pouring without spilling a drop. Very industrious. Thank you. I do hope you're not overstepping. You pause. Overstepping? She smiles. Edric has always been generous with power, but one must be careful not to confuse governance with ambition. You tilt your head. And one must be careful not to confuse tradition with stagnation. The tension hums like a violin string. Then she sips her tea, and the moment passes. When you return to your chambers, Lise greets you with a tray of steaming water and a quiet, I don't like how she smiles. You don't either. That evening, Edric joins you unannounced. He doesn't say much at first, just pours himself wine and sits near the fire, watching the flames dance. You met Saracea today, he says eventually. I did. She worries about control. You raise an eyebrow. Yours or mine? He shrugs. Both. There's a pause. Then, gently. Do you ever miss your sister? You don't answer right away. You stare into the fire, thinking of the letter, of Thorn the one-eyed falcon, of laughter across a shared pillow as children. Every day, you say. He nods. Me too. Mine died when we were young. A long silence stretches between you. Then he rises, sets down his cup, and murmurs, The court sees everything. Be careful who you let embroider beside you. You don't sleep much that night. Your dreams are filled with whispered conversations and birds flying into closed windows. When you wake, you find a small embroidered square left by your sewing stand. A perfect falcon. One-eyed. No note. Just thread. You stare at it for a long time, wondering who made it and what it means. You spend the next several mornings pretending to embroider, but actually reading hidden letters. Lisa has mastered the art of folding parchment so thin it can be tucked into the hem of your gown or slip behind a false panel in your jewelry box. The messengers come disguised as candle makers, parchment merchants, even a boy with a limp and a sack of walnuts. Every note is short, coded, almost poetic. Your sister writes in metaphors. She refers to courtiers as birds. The raven perched near the hearth speaks too often of feathers not his own. You decode it slowly, like a bedtime riddle meant to keep you half insane. Apparently, her general husband suspects she's up to something, but hasn't acted yet. He's still sharpening the blade rather than swinging it. You're learning to speak this new language of survival, silences and glances, brushstrokes and thread patterns. It's not treason, yet just careful awareness. One of your favorite new hiding places? A linen scroll you've been pretending to embroider with sparrows and stars. Everyone thinks it's charming. In truth, you've stitched a copy of a river chart, one that shows the movement of border patrols. Historians still debate whether women like you acted as active intermediaries or simply passive observers. The answer, as you're now discovering, is a firm yes. Your official cover is that you're working on your wedding tapestry. The happy union. The joining of houses. The everlasting peace. Etc., etc. It's going to be awful. Too many gold threads and not enough artistic honesty. But in the private moments, when no one's watching, you work on a second tapestry, one with no heraldry, no saints, just a woman standing between two castles, her arms outstretched, as arrows fly past her on both sides. Lisa calls it therapeutic treason. You call it therapy. In the afternoons, you begin to spend more time in the library, not just the main one, but the older, dustier wing no one visits. It smells like dry ink and forgotten schemes. You sit at the corner table under the cracked window and begin reading letters from years past. The old Duchess, Edric's grandmother, kept detailed correspondence. Turns out, she wrote in code, too. You crack the cipher by accident, noticing how every fifth word aligns with the wax seals pressed into the margins. Suddenly, her notes transform from ramblings about bread deliveries into intelligence briefings. This place has always run on secrets. Edric finds you there one evening, ink-stained fingers and all. Planning a coup? He asks, amused. Just reviewing the minutes of someone else's. He chuckles and sits beside you. You're better at this than I expected. Everyone keeps saying that. You seem surprised. I was taught to marry, not maneuver. Well, he says, you're maneuvering. There's a pause. Then, I received word today. A neighboring baron is asking for you to mediate a trade route dispute. Not me. You. Because I'm neutral? Because they think you'll be fair. You don't respond right away. Instead, you look at the cracked ceiling of the library and let the weight of that settle. They trust you. Or at least, they believe you won't gut them in their sleep. Progress. That night, you reread your sister's latest message. There's something different this time, less guarded. She's included a joke about a courtier who fell into a fountain chasing a parrot. You laugh out loud. Then you notice the last line. Have you forgiven him yet? No name. But you know who she means. You stare at the sentence for a long time. Forgiveness isn't something you've had time to think about. You've been too busy surviving, building, calculating, and yet Edric has changed. Slowly, subtly. He doesn't flinch when you speak up in meetings anymore. He asks your advice. He sits with you at night, even when there's nothing to say. He walks beside you, not ahead. But does that undo what happened? The war? The family you lost? You fold the letter, slide it into a hidden seam in your pillow. The answer, you decide, doesn't need to be written yet. One morning, you catch one of the younger maids copying your embroidery. You glance at her piece, sloppy lines, tangled thread, but unmistakably mimicking the border of your secret tapestry. You say nothing. Just nod and move away. But later, you slip a note to Lise. Find out who she's working for. Because not everyone who watches you is an ally. And in a castle like this, even birds carry knives. The palace is quieter at night, but not truly quiet. No, the palace whispers. The stone halls carry murmurs like water in a dry channel. Servants speak in fragments. Courtiers walk in socks. Laughter echoes down the long corridors. But when you follow it, there's no one there. Doors click shut too softly. Tapestries shift when no one touches them. You're learning to listen. To the kinds of silences that mean someone has walked ahead of you and cleared the hallway. To the kind that suggests someone is waiting behind a screen. To the carefully timed creak of floorboards during conversations meant to be overheard. You sleep with a knife under your pillow now. Not paranoia. Protocol. Palace life teaches you that trust is rationed. Truth is masked, and every friendly smile deserves a quiet second glance. Tonight, the court holds a moon feast, a tradition unfamiliar to you but beloved here. It's supposedly to honor the old goddess of night harvests, though now it's just an excuse to drink mead, eat pomegranate seeds, and dress in varying shades of silver. You wear a gown of dark blue with embroidered starlight. It makes you feel less like a bride and more like a weapon someone left unattended in the night. Edric is already at the feast when you arrive. He looks surprised to see you, pleasantly surprised. He gestures to the seat beside him. You join him without fanfare. The nobles are in fine form tonight. There's less politics and more wine. Jokes fly faster than arrows in battle. Someone is already loudly challenging a ducal cousin to a foot race. A minstrel sings a love ballad so tragic even the candles seem to flicker sadly. You laugh once, then catch Lady Saracea watching you. She's not drinking, not talking, just watching. Who is she loyal to? You ask Edric, keeping your smile in place. No one, he replies. She's loyal to memory. That's not comforting. Later in the evening, a visiting noble from the eastern marches leans across the table and asks you a very specific question about your old family's wine trade routes. It's framed like small talk, but you can smell the bait under the honey. You pretend not to notice. We used to import from the southern coast, you say casually, but the barrels always came half evaporated, too many holes. He nods politely, doesn't press, but you note his name, his crest. The way his left hand trembled slightly when you mentioned southern coast. Lisa finds you an hour later by the dessert table, pretending to care about candied figs. He's the one who tried to bribe our courier, she whispers. 6 days ago. Of course he is. Historians still argue whether women in positions like yours were truly informed, or merely placed there as tokens. The people who write such things, clearly, have never tried to survive a moon feast with 5 types of mead and 14 hidden agendas. You retire early. Edric follows not long after. When he enters your chamber, he looks tired but oddly content. You handled the wine trap well. I was tempted to answer with an actual root just to see what happened. I think he would have fainted. You chuckle. Then, because it's late and the fire is low, you ask him something you've been wondering. Who spies for you? He raises an eyebrow. What do you mean? You've never asked me for secrets about my family, my lands, my people. Why? Edric sits across from you, hands clasped loosely. Because you'd lie. You blink. Anyone would, he continues. Even if they didn't mean to. Memory bends. Loyalty shifts. And besides, if I trusted the answer, I'd lose the question. That's oddly poetic and slightly terrifying. He studies you. Why? Do you spy for yours? I listen. You admit. It's not the same, but not different either. You're both quiet after that. The fire crackles. The wind outside sings through the stone like a ghost hunting for an open window. You wonder who else is awake, who's plotting, who's eavesdropping, who's deciding whether to smile at you tomorrow or poison your breakfast. There's a knock at the door. A page hands you a package. No seal. Just folded silk. Inside is a scarf embroidered with your homeland's crest. You lift it carefully. Edric frowns. That's not from me. I know. There's a note. Just 3 words. We still watch. You stare at it. Not with fear. With purpose. Because the message isn't a threat. It's a reminder. You're not alone in this palace of whispering stone. Someone remembers. Someone wants you to remember. And you will. As you fold the scarf, you think of the corridors, the servants, the chessboard politics you now walk each day. You are no longer a piece. You're learning how to move the pieces. It begins, as many things do in castles, with rumors about your womb. You're brushing your hair when Lisa drops the first hint. They're saying the Duchess hasn't taken ill, but taken root. You blink. What? Meaning they think you're pregnant. You're not. But facts rarely get in the way of a good palace rumor, especially ones that involve heirs, succession, and the future of an uneasy peace. Later that morning, during a walk in the frost-laced garden, a courtier you barely know glides past and says, "Glowing today, my lady." It's not a compliment. It's a test. By evening, someone has sent a congratulatory pear tart shaped like a cradle. You eat the whole thing out of spite. Historians often describe noble women's bodies as dynastic vessels, a phrase so uncomfortable you want to punch a textbook. And now that you've been married for several months, people are growing impatient, not because they care, but because they're bored. And heirs are never just babies, they're political insurance policies and soft skin. At dinner, Edric notices your expression as you stab a roast fig into oblivion. "You heard then," he says. "I've heard nothing but," you reply. "And apparently I glow." He grunts. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault, unless it is, in which case, congratulations." He almost smiles, but there's tension there, under the surface, like an arrow waiting to be loosed. "They expect it," he says finally. "And if it doesn't happen, they'll speculate. They already are." You don't tell him about the midwife who left a fertility charm on your windowsill, or the cleansing tea one of the ladies offered you, which smelled suspiciously like boiled hay and regret. You're not even sure you want children, not now, not like this, and yet, you know what happens to noble women who don't produce heirs. They fade. They're replaced. Their value recalculated by the ounce. You also know what happens to women who do. Their children are taken, raised as pawns, used as leverage, sometimes weaponized. There is no winning this game. You spend the next week in your territories, checking roads and meeting with local reeves. You do real work, important work. And yet every conversation seems to end with a veiled glance at your stomach. One old woman hands you a loaf of bread and says, "For the child." You smile tightly. "What child?" "Oh, you'll see," she says with unsettling confidence. Spring always brings surprises. Your quirky tidbit for today? In this part of the kingdom, there's a superstition that any noblewoman who hears an owl hoot 3 nights in a row will bear twins. You hear owls nightly now, not 1, not 2, but 3. Lise hears them too and just mutters, "They're trolling you." You can't help but laugh, but laughter doesn't stop the questions, or the gifts, or the pressure. The castle seems to be watching your waistline more than your decisions now. Even Lady Saracea joins in. At a court gathering, she sidles up to you, wine in hand, and purrs. "You've been quiet lately, my dear. Nesting, perhaps?" "I've been governing," you reply sweetly. "You should try it sometime." The table goes silent for a breath. Then laughter. From Edric. From others. Even a chuckle from a steward. Saracea smiles. But it's a dagger in velvet. Later. Edric pulls you aside. "That was risky. She started it. I'm not complaining." He hesitates. Then, "I won't pressure you. About heirs." You nod. "Good. Because I will." It's the most honest conversation you've had in weeks. But the rumors don't stop. If anything, they multiply. You're now apparently carrying twins, or a child with golden eyes, or, according to one particularly creative kitchen boy, a dragon egg. You decide to take control of the narrative. You begin making subtle appearances in the town again, walking, inspecting, not glowing. You ask questions. You show up unannounced at the bathhouse project site. You order additional funding for winter firewood. You're not an incubator. You're a governor. And slowly, people remember, one morning, a messenger from the outer provinces arrives with a strange request. The women of a remote village want you to bless their well. Not Edric. You. You ride out the next day, through snow and pine, and find yourself welcomed with steaming bowls of lentil stew and too many babies shoved into your arms. The well is small, circular, frosted with moss and thyme. You stand beside it, raise your hands, and say the most diplomatic blessing you can muster without knowing what kind of god they even pray to. They cheer anyway. Afterward, one woman tugs at your cloak. They call you the border queen, she says, beaming, because you don't belong to any side. You ride home in silence. The scarf your sister sent you is tucked around your shoulders. You think of her, of the falcon, of the delicate thread between freedom and duty. That night, you bleed, quietly, predictably, painfully. You toss the fertility charm into the fire. And when Edric enters the chamber, he doesn't ask. He just pours you tea, sits, and says nothing, which, for once, is exactly what you need. She arrives unannounced, not with fanfare, not even a formal letter of intent, just a caravan of velvet-draped coaches, 4 carts of trunks, 2 spindly dogs, and a scent trail of rosewater and old iron. Edric's mother, technically, the Dowager Duchess. Unofficially, the Inquisition in silk. You meet her in the courtyard. She disembarks slowly, a crane of a woman wrapped in sable and suspicion. Her eyes, gray, sharp, unreadable, sweep over you with the efficiency of a ledger audit. So, she says, this is the bride. You dip into a respectful curtsy. Welcome to Gravan, my lady. I lived here 20 years, she replies coolly. It hardly feels like a welcome. Historians still debate whether dowager mothers wielded real political power or simply haunted the halls like ancient relics. Yours does both. She hasn't lived in the palace since Edric came of age, but her influence clings like mildew. Every servant straightens when she passes. Even the hounds walk in formation. That evening, she insists on dining with the family. You've barely sat before she begins her inspection. How many languages do you speak? 3, you answer, swallowing a mouthful of roast turnip. Do you ride? Well enough not to fall off. Can you quote scripture? Selectively. She tilts her head. And which saint protects border brides? You smile politely. Whichever one's still answering letters. Edric stifles a cough that's definitely laughter. The dowager does not smile. She stays for a week, during which time your schedule mysteriously rearranges itself. You're summoned to prayer at sunrise, invited to observe the kitchens before dawn, asked to inspect the linens for any signs of moth infiltration. It's like a spiritual boot camp for daughter-in-laws. At one point, she hands you a bundle of lemon balm and says, "Steep this in water. It calms anxious blood." "I'm not anxious," you say. "Of course you are," she replies. And yet, as the days pass, you find yourself intrigued. She's sharper than most at court. She knows every steward's name, remembers which baker's son died in the war, and catches a maid smuggling spice from the larder using only her nose. She's terrifying but not thoughtless. She even corners Edric one afternoon and says, "She's clever. Don't let her get bored." "I'm trying not to," he mutters, walking straight into a door frame. Still, there's tension. It simmers beneath the surface, like a kettle left on low heat. And one evening, it boils. You're sitting by the fire, embroidering nothing in particular, when she steps into your solar uninvited. She sits, folds her hands, fixes you with those hawk eyes. "You don't love him," she says, without preamble. You don't reply. Because what's the right answer to that? She continues, "That's not a crime. We're not in a ballad. But if you wish to survive here, you must make the court believe that you do." You set down your hoop. "And if I don't, they'll start choosing your replacement before you're even buried." The silence after that is thick enough to cut. She stands, moves toward the door, then pauses. "My son is many things," she says softly, "but he's not cruel. Don't punish him for this war." "I don't," you reply. "I just remember it." That night, you dream of your sister again, this time holding a baby wrapped in foreign banners. The child has your eyes and someone else's laugh. When you wake, Edric is already at your side, staring at a sealed letter in his hands. "It's from the capital," he says. "Good news or bad?" He doesn't answer, just hands it to you. You read it in silence. The king requests your presence, both of you, in 3 weeks, for what he calls a celebration of alliances. You've been summoned like performers to a stage, marriage paraded for all to see, peace measured by smiles and seating arrangements. You hand the letter back. Will your mother be attending?" "She's organizing it." "Of course she is." You rise, walk to the window. The snow has stopped falling. Beneath it, the earth waits, hard, still, unreadable. "Then we'd better look the part," you say. Edric joins you at the window. He doesn't touch you, but he stands close enough for you to hear his breath. "We could still leave," he says quietly. You glance at him. "And go where?" He shrugs. "Somewhere without thrones, or banners, or watchful mothers." It's not a real offer, but it's something. You return to your seat and pick up your embroidery hoop, the one with the woman between castles. She's nearly finished now. Arrows still flying, arms still raised. But this time, you add something new, a line of thread down the center of the woman's body, steel gray, unbreakable. You smile, and so you ride into the capital with a face that isn't entirely your own. It's painted in carmine and rosewater, framed by precisely pinned hair, and guarded by layers of velvet too stiff to breathe in. You look like a portrait come to life, one meant to sit quietly in the background of a celebration, smiling just enough to reassure nervous diplomats and distant cousins. Behind you rides Edric, dressed like a peace treaty in human form, brocade, sword, polished boots. He looks magnificent. He looks miserable. The city walls rise like a judgment ahead, stone teeth carved with saints and suffering. Bells toll your arrival, and from the first clang, the performance begins. Banners flutter, flowers fall. The people cheer. They don't cheer you. Exactly. They cheer what you represent. Peace, unity, an end to the decades-long feud that has gutted both kingdoms like a fish left too long in the sun. You wave, you smile, you practice diplomacy in every blink. At the palace, Servants swarm like bees around a dying flower. You're escorted to your chamber, larger than your own solar back home and twice as impersonal. Everything here smells of soap, lavender, and just a hint of expectation. You barely have time to remove your cloak before you're summoned to meet the Queen. Yes, the Queen? Edric's aunt by blood, your monarch by marriage, a woman who once had her sister exiled for marrying too far south. She receives you in the glass atrium, surrounded by lemon trees and guards who look like they haven't blinked since the last war. She doesn't rise when you enter, just gestures to the seat across from her. "You're thinner than I expected," she says, examining you like a newly acquired statue. "I've been very busy," you reply evenly. She sips her wine. "They say you're effective." "I try to be." "They say you've softened Edric." "He was soft the moment I met him." You say, too sweetly, a beat. Then, surprisingly, a smirk. "I like you," she says, though it sounds more like a threat than a compliment. Historians still argue whether queens truly chose which women to elevate, or if they simply tolerated the ones who refused to disappear. You intend to fall firmly in the second category. You spend the next 2 days navigating a gauntlet of public events. There's a poetry reading where you're expected to laugh at the right metaphors and clap during the long, sad one about a goose in exile. There's a feast where each course comes with a diplomatic riddle. What does the beetroot signify? Is the pheasant roasted in oil or tension? But the real test is the seating ceremony. This, you've learned, is where alliances are truly displayed. Who sits next to whom? Who is given the silver goblets? Who is served first? You are placed between two women, Lady Marin, a noble from your husband's side who once swore she'd never acknowledge your bloodline, and Countess Eleanor, a famously neutral courtier who wears birds in her hair and talks only in hypotheticals. "Do you think, if we gave up all borders," Eleanor whispers, "the birds would nest in peace?" You nod vaguely while pretending to enjoy parsnip soup. Meanwhile, Lady Marin smiles at you with all the warmth of an open grave. "I hear you've gained weight," she says, "and yet still lighter than your last scandal," you reply, not missing a beat. Eleanor nearly spits out her wine. Marin goes red. The soup suddenly tastes better. Later, Edric finds you in the garden, tucked away beneath a pergola. "I heard what you said," he murmurs, one corner of his mouth twitching. "Which part?" "The scandal one." You lean back against the wall. "Do you think I overstepped?" "I think you survived," he says. Again. He offers you a stolen apple from the royal pantry. You take it. You eat it. It's underripe and slightly sour. But in the middle of the bite, you hear them. Footsteps. Not toward you. Away. Fast. Quiet. You rise. Motion for Edric to stay. You follow the sound around the side of the garden. Past the lemon trees. Past the sculpture of Saint Hagen fighting off diplomatic irrelevance with a scroll. And there, behind the hedge, you see her. Your sister. She's in a servant's cloak. Hood raised. Eyes wide. Holding a letter. You reach her in 3 steps. "I wasn't sure you'd come." She breathes. "I almost didn't." She thrusts the letter into your hand. "Things are changing. Back home. Fast. And not in a good way." You glance at the seal. Broken. Smudged. Your stomach tightens. "Come with me," you whisper. "I can't. They're watching. Always watching." "But..." She pulls her hood tighter. "There's a plan. Not mine. But yours now." She presses your hand once. then disappears into the dark. You stand in the stillness for a moment, the letter pulsing in your palm. When you return to Edric, he's waiting with concern on his brow and cinnamon on his sleeve. "Everything all right?" "Not even slightly," you say. You hide the letter inside your sleeve and rejoin the party, because this is the capital, and here you smile first, then strike. You don't open the letter until well after midnight. The candles are low. Lisa is asleep in the adjoining room, curled on a chair with one boot still on. Edric's breath is steady beside you. He fell asleep with one hand resting on the hilt of his sword, like a man who's never quite forgotten the battlefield. You slip from the bed and pad barefoot to the hearth. The letter is folded in quarters, the ink smudged, the paper warm with secrecy. You read it once, then again, and again. It's not a letter. Exactly. More like a ledger, a list, names, locations, keywords, several of them familiar. One line makes your skin go cold. The treaty clause permitting marital annulment in the event of resumed hostilities has been reactivated. You sit down, hard. That clause, that quiet little footnote buried beneath layers of ceremonial Latin and diplomacy, the one Edric once mentioned in passing, the one that if Chai invoked would allow either side to dissolve your marriage should war resume. It's back, which means someone is planning for war. You study the rest. The document is clearly a leak. Whoever compiled it had access to private discussions, noble house correspondences, even coded lists of troop reallocations. It's a spy report, a warning, and it's been handed to you. Historians still argue whether noble women ever intercepted or redirected intelligence that changed the course of wars. Some dismiss it as fiction, drama for romance scrolls and court gossips are... But here you are, barefoot, shaking slightly, holding a page that could redraw borders if you choose to act on it. You tuck the letter into your boot, pull a blanket around your shoulders, and watch the last of the fire curl into ash. At dawn, Edric finds you at the window, awake and tense. You didn't sleep. No. He watches you for a beat. Was it her? You nod. He sits beside you on the stone ledge. Is it bad? It's a shift. Not immediate, but planned. He exhales. They're testing us. They're testing me. That's the truth of it. You're the linchpin, the lever, the face on the coin they're about to flip. What are you gonna do? He asks. Smile. You reply. Eat breakfast, attend court, be the bride. You do exactly that. Because this is the part where you perform. You sit through a morning of trade discussions where old men argue about barley tariffs and act like grain shipments are more important than lives. You nod at the right times. Offer one polite suggestion that somehow solves a 3-year dispute between two earls. Everyone claps. Then there's a midday hunt. You hate hunting, but you ride out anyway, dressed in forest green, with a hawk pinned to your collar and a sword you barely know how to use. The woods are muddy, the dogs too eager. Edric helps you dismount at one point, his hand lingering on yours for a moment too long. I used to like this, he says, when it felt like a game. It still is, you reply. But now the prey wears jewelry. You bag no deer, but you do overhear a curious exchange between two lords near the hunting lodge. They're whispering poorly about troop movements in the western reaches. One mentions your name. She'll be the excuse, if it comes. Not a... The That night, after the feast, pheasant again, overcooked. You sit with Edric by the fire in your chambers. You've said nothing more about the letter, but it's eating you alive. So you ask, quietly, if war comes, what happens to me? He doesn't answer at first. Then, nothing I would allow. That's not how law works. It is when I break it. You turn to him. Really look at him. I need to know you're not pretending. He flinches, just slightly. I'm not, but you would, if you had to. He doesn't deny it. You stand and walk to the tapestry. The real one. The one you've been stitching in secret, now hidden behind the fire screen. You pull it out, hold it up. He stares. The woman between castles, the arrows, the thread of steel down her spine. She's not surrendering, you say softly. He stands, walks over, looks closer. No, he says. She's waiting. You roll it back up, place it gently in its hiding place. Then you retrieve the letter from your boot and hand it to him. He reads. Silent, jaw tight. At last, he looks up. This is treason. No, you say. This is insurance. There's a pause. Then he says, we need a plan. And just like that, the game shifts again. You spend the next 3 hours sketching out possibilities, routes, codes, allies, messages to send, safe houses to secure. Edric knows some. You know others. Between you, a strange alliance is born, one not arranged by kings, but forged in firelight and fear. Eventually, you lie down, exhausted. He doesn't join you right away, but before the candle burns out, he presses something into your palm, a small token, smooth, familiar. It's a tiny carved falcon, thorn. The stonemason in the city market, he says. I saw it and thought, maybe. You hold it tight, not just a bird, a memory, a promise, and maybe, just maybe, a beginning. By morning, the feast has become a battlefield, not with swords, those are still sheathed, but with smiles so sharp they could shave bark off a birch. Every conversation is now a skirmish, every toast, a maneuver, and you, of course, are seated at the center of it all, right between a bishop who smells like cloves and a baron who believes subtlety is for poets. It's the festival of accord, a formal banquet meant to commemorate the lasting peace between your house and Edric's. But you've never seen a room more loaded with tension outside a barracks. The queen presides at the head of the table, her gold headdress casting rings of light across her goblet. You sit 4 seats down, but her gaze reaches you anyway, measured, skeptical, amused. Edric is across from you, not beside. That's deliberate. Separation creates narrative. Let the people wonder, is there strain between them? Has the bride lost favor? You take a slow sip of spiced wine and smile at no one in particular. You know exactly what they're doing. The first course is trout, served with pomegranate, symbolic, obviously, fertility, union, the blood of ancient enemies reconciled. You chew it thoughtfully while the nobles around you chatter about nothing that matters. Or so it seems. One of them, Lord Vailmon, from the southern coast, leans in and murmurs, I heard your sister made quite the scene in Astera last week. Something about a wine merchant and a ruined tapestry. You blink once. I'm sure she had excellent taste in both. He chuckles. You border girls always do. That's not a compliment. That's a probe. You don't bite. Instead, you watch the servers carefully. They move like dancers. Which cups they fill. Who gets which plate first. It's all part of the choreography. You remember your sister's letter. The line that said, "They'll test your loyalty in public before they betray you in private." Sure enough, the second course arrives, and it's your homeland's signature dish, braised hare with mint and honey glaze. How thoughtful. You raise your glass. "To the chefs," you say, "for reminding me of home." They smile, but they're disappointed. No slip, no crack, no confession of homesickness or wavering loyalty. Still, you know something is coming, and it arrives during dessert. You're handed a sealed scroll by a servant, publicly, quietly, as if it's just an innocent diplomatic note. Everyone sees it. No one says anything. But you feel the shift. You break the seal. It's an invitation. From the Duke of Turnval, a minor but well-placed noble, aligned with neither your side nor Edric's. Neutral on paper, dangerous in practice. The message is short. Let us discuss what peace costs and what it profits. My gardens are lovely this time of year. You fold it neatly, tuck it into your sleeve, then look directly at the Queen. She's already watching you. You nod slightly, and she, infuriatingly, raises one elegant eyebrow. Later that night, you confront Edric in the gallery, surrounded by frescoes of heroic ancestors doing heroic things in deeply impractical armor. "They're baiting me," you say. "I know. They want to see which way I lean. Toward them or toward me?" You fold your arms. "Are you asking as a husband or as a lord?" He considers. "As both." You pace. "The Duke of Turnval wants a meeting." You tell him. "He thinks I might be movable." "And are you?" You stop pacing. "Are you?" He doesn't flinch. "No. But I'd understand if you were." That surprises you more than anything. You sit on the stone bench beneath a faded mural of a phoenix mid-squawk. The treaty is paper, the piece is theater, but you glance at him. You're the only thing in this palace that doesn't lie. He joins you. "I've lied before." "So have I." Silence. Then he says, "Do you want to meet him? Turnval?" You nod. "Yes. On my terms." "Good," he says. "Then we make a new plan." You spend the next day preparing, not weapons, not poisons, but words. You memorize his lineage, his debts, his cousin's scandal, his mistress's tax evasion. Lise brings you fresh documents. Edric gives you a list of things not to say. You ignore half of them, and then you dress carefully, not in peace colors, not in mourning, but in bold red, your homeland's old war shade, with a brooch shaped like a knot. Let them wonder what you're tying, or untying. You ride to Turnval's manor under minimal guard. Just Lisa, one night, a weathered horse with more opinions than sense. The gardens are, indeed, lovely. He meets you under a tree shaped like a spiral, offers wine. You decline. He doesn't speak in pleasantries. He goes straight to it. "The king doesn't trust your union," he says, "nor do half the birds in the royal aviary." You reply, "He's re-examining the clause." "I'm aware." He leans forward. If war breaks out, you lose everything." You tilt your head. "Not everything." He smiles. "You're clever, and you're underestimating me." You don't give him what he wants. Not a promise, not a plan, just enough to make him nervous. You let him see the steel thread, and then you leave. As you ride away, you whisper to Lise, "They wanted a wife who would waver. They got a woman who weaves," she says. You smile. The kind of smile that smells like smoke, because peace is a banquet, and you're learning to host. The clause is real. You hold it in your hands 1 week later, delivered in a sealed satchel marked Confidentialis Regni, meaning definitely not for your eyes, which is funny, because it's clearly meant to be found. It's written in impeccable legal Latin, full of gilded phrases and ceremonial repetition, but its meaning is as sharp as a guillotine. If the peace is broken, the marriage may be dissolved without consequence, without lands returned, without titles revoked, without heirs considered. It's not just a contract, it's a warning. Historians love clauses like this, buried in scrolls, wrapped in dusty ribbon, cited centuries later to justify betrayals, annulments, even executions. What they rarely mention is what it feels like to be the clause. To wake up knowing your worth is ink deep, clause bound, and entirely conditional. You don't cry. Not this time. Instead, you invite Edric to dinner. A private one. Just you, him, a quiet fire, and exactly 2 courses, bread and wine. If they're going to treat your marriage like sacrament, you might as well lean in. He reads the document slowly, folds it, looks at you. So now we know, he says. You nod. The moment they want to unmake this peace, they'll start with me. He doesn't argue. That's new. What will you do? He asks. You look him straight in the eye. I'll stay. Why? Because I can't be unmade so easily. He breathes out through his nose, like someone releasing a long-held sword. There's more, you add. Turnval's been receiving riders at night, 3 of them from the old coast. 1 wore a crest from my homeland, though it's been out of fashion since my grandfather's time. Are they trying to pull you back? No, you say. They're trying to split me in half. Edric pours wine, doesn't drink it. If war comes, then I'll be the first pawn and the first casualty. And if it doesn't, then I'll be the reason it didn't. It's a gamble, saying that aloud, but he doesn't flinch. Instead, he reaches for the flame-warped spoon beside the hearth, one you both use to stir tea when you're pretending this marriage is normal. You know, he says slowly, this clause cuts both ways. You glance up. If they start the war, he continues, they forfeit the right to annulment, but only if we prove it was them. You stare at him. You're suggesting a trap? No, he replies. I'm suggesting we let them walk into one. You spend the next 3 days preparing, quietly, strategically. You use every lesson the palace has ever taught you. How to listen without reacting, how to nod without agreeing, how to dress like a duchess and move like a spy. You rewrite the embroidery pattern of your secret tapestry. Now the arrows don't just fly past the woman. Some of them bend, curve, return. You gather information, not from guards or generals, but from ladies, because while men posture in council chambers, women run the empire's heartbeat, kitchens, nurseries, larders, laundries. Lisa helps you build a map of conversations, who visits whom, who whispers where, which pastries vanish from which plates and reappear in the wrong bedchambers. You begin to see the shape of it. Not war, not yet, but leverage. They want to make the peace so fragile, so unstable, that the clause becomes necessary. That you become unnecessary. But you're always 1 stitch ahead. At the next court gathering, you wear both your family's colors and Grevin's. Bold move. Highly improper. Even your earrings are mismatched, 1 crest for each side. Gasps ripple through the ballroom like spilled perfume. Lady Saracia looks personally offended. Lady Marin faints theatrically and no one offers her a chair. But Edric walks in, sees you, and smiles like someone watching the final move of a very long game. You curtsy at precisely the wrong moment, interrupting a toast about unbreakable harmony. Then you offer your arm to a visiting noble from the Eastern Territories and ask him about his vineyards. By dessert, your name is on everyone's lips. By dawn, you receive another letter. This one is unsigned. Just 5 words. You've overplayed your hand. You burn it, because you haven't even started. You do, however, send one of your own. To the Queen. You request a private audience. Alone. Lise looks terrified when you tell her. But you've stopped flinching. If they want to annul you, let them see what it looks like when a woman doesn't fold. You meet the Queen in her winter salon, a cold, glass-walled room filled with frost-bitten plants and quiet ambition. She sits like marble, watches you enter, doesn't speak. So you do. I'm aware of the clause. I suspected you were, she replies. And I'm aware that certain nobles are hoping to invoke it. They are. You wait. She doesn't offer tea. This is not a tea kind of meeting. You have a choice, she says finally. Let the marriage end quietly. Go home. No disgrace, no trial, or stay, and risk being labeled a traitor when the first arrow flies. You smile. It's not pleasant. I choose the third option. She blinks. Which is? I stay, I fight, and I prevent the first arrow from flying. The Queen considers. You'd keep a war from starting. Yes. How? You stand. By making peace more dangerous to break than war is to begin. You leave her there, among her frost-bitten roses, and that night you sew the final line of your tapestry, not a woman between castles, but a queen, seated on 2 thrones, steel in her spine, fire in her hands, and no clause written strong enough to stop her. You don't speak to Edric the next morning. Not out of anger, there's no room for that anymore, but because every word you exchange now is a thread in a web, and the web must be laid silently. Instead, you move through the palace like a whisper wrapped in silk. There's a strategy meeting in the council chamber. You aren't invited, of course, but you still attend. You arrive just as the doors close, nod politely to the steward, and seat yourself in the gallery above. No one stops you. They know better now. Below, nobles gather like vultures around a carcass made of maps. Disputes over border tariffs. Accusations of smuggled salt and falsified grain tallies. Someone suggests raising levies in the outer provinces. You note the sneer in his voice when he says outer. They mean your lands. They always do. You make no comment. But when Edric glances up, your eyes meet. 1 second. That's all. But it's enough. Afterward. He joins you in the corridor. No words. Just the quiet pressure of his hand brushing yours before he turns away again. In the afternoon, you oversee the distribution of winter grain. Lise notes the extra sacks disappearing from the storerooms. You trace the pattern, not famine, but preparation. Someone stockpiling. You send a letter to the Southern Reeve, under the guise of a knitting pattern. Check the barns for unauthorized ledgers. Wear gray on market day, if confirmed. You receive your answer 3 days later. A single skein of thread. Dyed gray. Placed discreetly in your traveling basket. They're moving supplies east. That night, as snow begins to fall, you and Edric finally speak again. You meet on the outer terrace of the castle, wrapped in heavy cloaks. The air is sharp. Your breath clouds between you like smoke signals. They're getting ready, you say. I know. And they want me gone first. He nods. They think if you vanish, everything falls back into place. Then we prove them wrong. He takes your hand, not as a husband, not even as a co-ruler, as an ally. You begin to plan the banquet, not just any feast, the banquet of binding. It's a tradition so old no one quite remembers how it started, but once every decade, the ruling families of Greyvon and your homeland are invited to share one table, under the illusion of unity. It hasn't happened in 37 years. Too much blood, too many broken betrothals. But you send the invitations anyway, in your own hand, in both tongues. You receive responses laced with feigned enthusiasm and veiled threats. Lady Marin sends a reply that reads, I shall attend, though I fear some dishes may be hard to swallow. You consider sending her a menu titled Humble Pie, but settle for a seating chart that places her next to a bishop known for spitting when he speaks. As the preparations unfold, you take control of every detail. The color scheme, gray and violet, neutral, mourning, unifying. The seating, alternating loyalties, no two enemies side by side. The entertainment, a bard who once wrote a song so moving it caused two barons to forgive each other over roast duck. You hire him to perform twice. But the most critical choice? The guest list. Because you invite your sister, officially, openly, formally. It's a risk. A glaring, blinding risk. But it's also a statement. I am not hiding. I am not splitting in half. I am claiming both sides of this piece. The Queen summons you for tea. It's actual tea this time. Cinnamon and something slightly bitter. You're bold, she says. Thank you. I didn't say it was wise. You smile. It rarely is. She sets down her cup. You remind me of myself. Once. I'll take that as a compliment. You shouldn't, but she doesn't forbid the banquet. That's as close to support as you'll ever get. The castle transforms in preparation. Banners are repaired. Tapestries rehung. The kitchen roars day and night. You even commission a new mural in the Great Hall, 2 trees growing from opposite cliffs, their roots tangled below the surface. The night before the banquet, Edric finds you staring at it. You think they'll understand the message? No, you say, but they'll feel it. He doesn't argue. You stand together for a long time. No words, just the quiet understanding that tomorrow, everything changes, one way or another. That evening, you open a letter from your sister. Inside is a single sentence. No one trusts a bridge until they need to cross it. You fold the note, place it inside your bodice, and go to sleep with your hand resting on the unfinished embroidery beside your pillow. The woman on the tapestry no longer stands alone. You've added a shadow beside her. Not a husband, not a protector, just a figure walking in step, matching her pace. The banquet begins with trumpets, not because you wanted them, but because pageantry demands it. Brass blares from the balconies, shaking loose a bit of dust from the chandeliers and probably some of the guests' patience. But no one dares complain. Not tonight. Not when every eye in the kingdom is turned toward this hall. You stand at the top of the grand stair, cloaked in violet, a gold thread twined through your hair like a coronet. Beside you, Edric, armored not in steel but in ceremonial embroidery and restrained nerves. You can feel the tension humming beneath his calm exterior. He leans in. You still have time to pretend you're ill. You murmur back. Only if I can throw up on Lady Marin. He exhales a laugh. Then the trumpets end, and the two of you descend. The great hall has never looked more dangerously civil. The tables curve into a crescent, symbolic unity etched in wood and symmetry. Noble houses from both kingdoms are here, segregated politely, of course. They toast with different wines, eat from slightly different plates, but tonight they sit together. Mostly, you've memorized the seating chart like it's a map of contested territory, allies near the center, known agitators tucked near the musicians, loud, distracting, and hopefully drowned out by the harps. You and Edric take the central table. The moment you sit, silence sweeps through the room like a tide. Every eye turns to you. You raise your glass. To the peace we built, you say, voice clear, and to those who said we wouldn't last a season. There's laughter, nervous, forced, but it breaks the spell. The meal begins. Plates arrive in stages, roasted river fish, root vegetables carved into mythical beasts, a salad shaped like a diplomatic apology. You hardly taste it. You're watching faces, monitoring glances, reading posture like scripture, and then she arrives. Your sister, not in disguise, not in retreat, but in crimson and frost, striding into the hall as though it's hers. She walks directly to your table, bows just deeply enough to be correct, and says, I come on behalf of House Ilvara, and as sister to the Duchess, I bring my full allegiance. A murmur rises. Even Lady Saracea flinches. You rise and embrace her. The hall holds its breath and exhales. Historians often romanticize these moments. Two women, two kingdoms, one hug that supposedly healed old wounds. But what they miss is the calculation, the performance, the war tucked inside every syllable of courtesy. You and your sister sit side by side now, flanked by opposing loyalties. Her hand brushes yours under the table, and you feel a slip of paper pass like a prayer. You don't read it yet. You smile instead. Tell a story about the time you both accidentally released a hawk in the embroidery hall. The nobles laugh. Edric relaxes. The queen across the room nods once, but not everyone's convinced. Lord Vailman, greasy as always, stands for a toast. To the Duchess, he says, and to those with enough flexibility to serve two masters. You smile like you've rehearsed this. I serve one piece, you reply, and anyone who benefits from it. That earns actual applause. Lady Marin scowls so hard her necklace shifts. The musicians strike up a lull in the conversation. A harper plays a tune from your childhood kingdom. You hear it and ache, but you don't show it, because now it's time. You excuse yourself, walk, carefully, deliberately, through the hall. Every eye watches. You stop before the queen, bow, and offer her the scroll your sister slipped you. Recent intelligence, you say, regarding certain troop movements in the eastern valleys. She accepts it without blinking, reads it, her lips pressed tight. Is it accurate? She asks. Yes, you say. And if you doubt me, check the grain shipments, 3 times the usual, and no winter shortage to justify it. A pause. Then she says, well played. You return to your seat. No trumpets this time, but you don't need them. You've already signaled the message. I see everything. I will not be removed. I will not be outplayed. The rest of the banquet blurs. There's music, wine, a very impressive custard molded into the shape of a phoenix mid-flight. But the room has shifted. You've become the fixed point. Even Edric seems surprised. Later, as guests begin to trickle out, you and your sister step into the moonlit courtyard. The air is crisp, the frost hasn't yet settled, but the stone under your slippers feels like a warning. I shouldn't have come, she says, but I'm glad you did. You hand her a new letter, sealed, untraceable. If things break, you say softly, this tells you where to run. And you? I'll already be there. She hugs you once, tighter this time, and disappears into the night. You return to your rooms, strip off the velvet. Let Lise unpin the gold from your hair. As you crawl into bed, Edric's voice drifts from the shadows. They won't move against you now. You sigh. Not until they find a better angle. But tonight, he says, you stood taller than all of them. You lie there, eyes open in the dark. The piece still trembles. The claws still hangs like a blade. But now, you've made it clear. If they pull the trigger, you will be the recoil. The snow melts early this year. It seeps down from the eaves, dripping into buckets and puddles in the cracks between stone slabs where secrets like to hide. Beneath it, the ground softens. Wagons move faster. Messages, too. Spring always stirs things up. You feel it first, not in words, but in behavior. Guards start standing in pairs. Bread rations increase quietly. Someone replaces the tapestries in the east corridor with banners, fresher, bolder, more aggressive in color. And when you ask the steward about it, he shrugs and says, a seasonal refresh. Of course, just like the sharpened swords being inspected in the lower barracks. You're not the only one to notice. Edric starts riding early each morning, longer rides, always with different captains. He returns mud-caked, tight-jawed, and more silent than usual. One night, you stop him at the door. If war is coming, you say, I want to hear it from you, not the gossip girl in the linen yard. He doesn't lie. It's close, he admits, but not yet. And when it is, I'll ride out. I won't drag you with me. You step closer. I'm already with you. He lowers his gaze, not out of shame, out of weight. He knows what that means. The Queen summons you both, a week later. She's calm, icy calm. The kind of calm that only means someone is sharpening something behind a curtain. There have been border incidents, she says. 3, officially. 6, quietly. Someone's testing us. And they think I'm the weak link, you say. She doesn't deny it. They think you'll run when the gate swings open. Edric's voice cuts through. She's not running. The Queen's eyes flick to him. Let us hope not. Because if she does, so does the peace. That's when she says the words you've been dreading. The annulment clause is back under review. The air vanishes from the room. You sit straighter, so they'd unmake the marriage before they admit the treaty failed. They'd rather burn the contract than admit it was written on sand, she replies. And if we refuse, Edric asks, then you will be seen as rebels to the crown. That's the game now. Cornering you, isolating you, making the marriage the scapegoat, so the crown keeps its hands clean. Later that evening, you go to the West Tower alone. It's not forbidden, but no one likes the view. Just endless forest, broken now and then by towers and smoke. It's from this tower that signal fires would be lit. The first alarm, the first warning, the first war cry. You stare into the distance and try to remember what peace felt like. Lisa finds you there an hour later. They're expecting you to flinch, she says. I'm not going to flinch. I know, she says, but maybe let them think you will. She hands you a document, folded, fresh. It's from the Southern Reeves. You scan it quickly. A garrison has been spotted moving through your lands. Unofficially, no banner, no declared purpose, but well fed, well armed, and too silent for traitors. They're waiting, you whisper, for something, for you to blink, Lisa says, or fall. You return to Edric that night with a plan. We need to preempt them. With what? A skirmish? With something stronger. You show him the updated list of allegiances. Every noble who's visited you in the past 3 months. Every toast. Every banquet-side conversation. They think we've been playing defense, you say. But I've been gathering names. Edric studies the parchment. And these ones, they'll side with you? They'll side with whoever protects the grain routes. He smiles. Your talent for bribery is inspiring. It's not bribery, you say. It's nourishment with receipts. That week, you begin dispatching letters, not as the Duchess, but as the Lady of the Borderlands, a new title, one they gave you by accident, one you now lean into. You promise protection, fair trade, clear roads, no taxes for 6 months if they agree to declare neutrality in the event of conflict. A bold move, a dangerous one, but it works. Responses return, discreetly, almost sheepishly, written on flour sacks, wrapped in dried herbs, hidden in shipment manifests. We're with you. We'll hold. You kept the children fed. We remember. And one letter from an unknown hand, unsigned. Your name walks faster than your husband's sword. You hand the bundle to Edric, who looks at you like you've just pulled a blade from behind your back. They won't be able to claim it was all your idea anymore. You say, they'll try, but they'll know. On the eve of what may be the last night of peace, you walk through the great hall alone. The mural you commissioned is finished now. The twin trees, the tangled roots, but someone has added something, a birch, yeah, and stitched between the branches, one-eyed. You touch the paint softly, and in that moment, for all the diplomacy, all the silk and silver and song, you know the truth of it. You were never just married to Edric. You were married to a kingdom, to a line in the dirt, to an idea, and you've made it yours, not with swords, not with blood, but with grain, thread, and the quiet decision to stay, even when the world told you to run. The wind shifts. You feel it before the messengers arrive, before the trumpets sound, before the queen summons you for yet another veiled conversation dressed in steel and velvet. It starts with silence, no bird song, no bells, and then a horse's hooves, mud-caked, rider, breathless, scroll clenched in a trembling hand. War hasn't begun, but it's arrived. There's been a breach, not official, not yet, but undeniable. A caravan of your people, grain merchants under your sigil, attacked at dawn by soldiers from a neighboring province. No insignia, no prisoners taken. The wagons were set aflame, 3 dead, 1 child missing, and 2 men who recognized a commander's voice. Your cousin. So, that's it. Then, your blood, their sword. The queen holds council immediately. The great hall fills with tight mouths and sharpened gazes. You stand near the hearth, flame light flickering on your face. You don't speak yet. You wait. It's Edric who breaks the silence. This was deliberate. No insignia, someone protests. Could be bandits. With formation, he snaps. With our language, the queen lifts a single hand. The room obeys. Her eyes meet yours. Your homeland has not claimed responsibility, she says. But the act cannot go unacknowledged. All heads turn toward you. This is the moment they've prepared for. The wedge. The out. This is where you say, I cannot stand against my blood. Where they nod. Declare the treaty null. Breathe easier knowing the chessboard is cleared. You don't give them that. You step forward. Steady. Softly. I warned you, you say. They were moving supplies. They were maneuvering. And now, you continue. They are testing our resolve. You let the word our echo. I will not be the excuse for breaking peace. A ripple through the chamber. Confusion. Discomfort. Admiration. Fear. I will not be annulled like an ink blot on parchment. I will not be cast aside so you can call this a fresh war. You take another step. This is not new. This is not clean. This is the same war, unfinished, renamed, rewound. Edric watches you with something more than pride. It's awe. You turn to the queen. If you must act, then do so. But do not pretend this marriage failed. You didn't marry me to Edric. You married my body to this cause. You place a folded parchment on the council table. Here are the names of 17 neutral lords who have pledged to keep their banners down unless provoked. If you burn the treaty, you lose them all. Silence. Then the queen, softly. What are you suggesting? Call it sabotage, you say. Call it a rogue act. Punish the perpetrators, not the peace. A long pause. Then the queen, tired now, older than she looks, nods once. Let it be so. A breath. You are still married. The clause remains uninvoked. You return to your chamber hours later, soul wrung out like linen. Lise greets you with strong tea and stronger eyes. You shook them, she says. I didn't give them a choice. She lays out your nightgown. They'll test you again. Let them. Later, Edric finds you on the balcony, hair unbound, arms folded. You were magnificent, he says. I was angry. Sometimes that's the same thing, a beau. He stands beside you. The night is quiet again, but not peaceful, just paused. Are we safe? He asks. You shake your head. No. Then what are we? You look at him, for the first time, fully, not as the enemy, not as the partner handed to you by fate and contract, but as the only one still standing beside you. We're possible, you say. He leans in, forehead against yours, breath warm, but he doesn't kiss you. Not yet. Later that night, you sit at your embroidery table, one final thread in your hand. The tapestry is nearly complete. The woman at its center now stands between two burning castles, but she does not weep. She does not run. She has one hand raised to stop the fire. The other, gripping a quill. Because peace, after all, was never just a treaty. It was a choice, and you made it, again, and again, and again. You lie in bed now, eyes heavy, body still. The castle is quiet. Even the wind has softened. Somewhere below, the guards change shifts with the slow rhythm of boots and murmured greetings. Outside, the trees have stopped shifting, or perhaps you've simply stopped listening. Your hands are sore from writing, from needlework, from holding too tightly to things no one taught you how to carry. You breathe in and out. There's a small bird asleep on the windowsill, a real one, not embroidered, not symbolic, just there, You let yourself close your eyes. You're not the girl in the war tent anymore, not the trembling bride, not the silence between two angry kings. You are someone who stayed when it would have been easier to run. You stitched peace where no one thought it could last. You walked corridors full of eyes and never blinked first. You married the enemy, then made him a partner. You were the fine print. And now, you're the footnote they'll never erase. Tomorrow, there will be more letters, more border worries, more questions about loyalty, about love, about land. But not tonight. Tonight, the fire is low. The world, for once, is not asking you to speak. You pull the covers higher and sleep, finally, as yourself. End of script. Sweet dreams.